Thanks so much for joining us to celebrate this very first anthology. I'm so happy you all made it, and I'm so happy you're all here. Really excited to welcome you all, share these readings, tell you a little bit about Hillfire Press. This is going to be nice. So, first of all, my name is Lena Kraus. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Hillfire Press. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm so excited to share this with you. We have some really cool author readings lined up, but first I'd like to say a huge thank you to all the authors who've trusted me with their work and contributed to this beautiful anthology, and also to the team. I'm just always so impressed with how awesome they are, you all are, dear team, and also how much initiative you all take, and just, you know, everybody thinks of something and then together it just makes it so much better, which I think is very fitting for Hillfire's whole ethos. So yeah, I wanted to also, I just have to do this today because my sister has handed in her master's thesis today, and I'm really proud of you. And so I wanted to do a shout out to my sisters, Anna, who handed in her master's thesis, and then Luisa, who's just generally rocking her teacher training, and Mia, who's almost through with her finals and is doing awesome. So yeah, there you go. Thanks to my family for always supporting me, because I don't think I probably wouldn't have made Hillfire otherwise. Okay, so Hillfire Press was launched in January officially, and then I was trying to kind of find out when I had the initial idea, and I was looking through my phone and I found a note in, you know, just in the notes app, and it was from almost exactly a year ago. Oh, you can't see. It just says Edinburgh Gorse Press, prickly but beautiful, collectively beautiful, and then it says Hillfire Press, and that's it. And that's from like a year ago. So that must have been when I had the first idea. And I feel like this sums up my thinking for founding Hillfire. Most of the Hillfire team and the authors were involved with From Arthur's Seat, so I kind of was thinking of linking to that. And I just love how Arthur's Seat, that's the hill in Edinburgh, for those who maybe aren't familiar with it. It's covered in gorse, and when it starts flowering in the spring, the whole hill kind of lights up. And it just looks like the hill is on fire, so hence our name. And this is also the beautiful logo that we have, that you saw while we were trying to get while we're waiting for the stream to start, was created by Anna O'Connor, who's our art director, and she's also done the amazing cover design. So thanks to Anna as well. There's more to the Hillfire name and the symbolism, but we'll get to that afterwards when we have some time to have a discussion, and we'll just get right into the readings. I have Julia Guillamina for you first. Julia, she will read her short story, Veil of Tears. Julia is a Spanish and French author who started writing at the age of 10, and she still loves writing fan fiction. She's training to be a history and geography teacher in France, and she's the financial coordinator for Hillfire Press. So she helps me sort through all the invoices and make sure that we're not spending more money than we're earning, and I'm really grateful. And Julia told me she wrote Veil of Tears to explore the physical feeling of crying. So that's intriguing. Julia, when you're ready, go ahead and read, please.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming, and this is amazing. So This is a story of a little tear named Iso, who doesn't want to jump from the eye and run down the cheeks with the other tears. So at the beginning of the story, Iso is clinging to the eyelashes and watching the other tears. And then that's the passage I'm going to read. Sorry, I'm nervous. I expand and reduce with the fluid of the eyeball, all my particles vibrating. I'm finally calculating where I will plunge when a fellow arrives to my side and touches me. The fusion is instant. Together, we're isotime. Suddenly, I spiral around this newfound body. We embrace each other in a flourish. I feel dizzy. There's no ground anymore. The eyeball is gone, no lashes to hang to, only the open wide. As I watch the skin coming to meet us, I don't want to twirl with this Zyme anymore. I want to separate. I was sheltered on my spot, and Zyme had to drag me towards danger. The splash is coming, and it makes me shake with fury. We smash into the skin as I try to extricate myself from the substance embrace. But Zyme is amused and pulls me downhill. I am so busy hating this one that I almost miss the sensation of the skin. It is soft and smooth, greasy as we slick across it. I nestle in it, admiring how warm it is. There are a lot of tiny scales now that I feel from this close. They overlap one another, circled by tiny little holes. There is fluff, hair so fine I could never have dreamed it from up there in the eye, where lashes are so big and strong. There's no below from here. We're in the domain of epidermis. Zyme is so eager it makes me forget the dread. We go north, then east, then west, sharing the experience. Up there, we see flushed skin, reddened by the blood we feel running under our bodies. To the left, another river of 2 or 3 of us show us the way to the mouth. If we had felt the blood before, it was nothing compared to the lips. I swirl again against Zyme, and I laugh for the first time. It's exciting in a way I didn't know before. It's not the same thrill as being born, when the gland creates your first drop of compound and you glide against the eyeball with a sea of other young drops. This is a new type of fun, the kind that overtakes you when you're not expecting it. I have no power over this foolery. I never could have imagined it from up there. It would never have been possible without this other one, my other half. We look at each other, then we both look ahead, and together we sweep past the chin. It's then, when my Zyme slips on a dimple, that I see what lies downwards. The body that was seated has stood up, and the floor is so far away, much farther than it was when I lived in the eye. We should be frightened. We should stop here. I drag out my body, hanging every portion of it to the scales of the skin. These beautiful scales I just discovered. I don't want to part from them, and I assume my other one doesn't want to either. That's when I feel the breakup. Zyme, always moving, hasn't slowed down the fall, and is torn up from my body just after bypassing the jaw. There's a silence that echoes Zyme's fall, and I'm Iso again, alone, unprotected, broken. I don't want to dry out here all alone, waiting without knowing what's to come. I remember faintly having been afraid of this moment, but now I may be able to jump on my own. So I shudder to collect my body again before letting it go into the air. I know there is some part of me that is still up there, like a wake in the sea. That trickle is the destiny I followed, the way I traced by living it. The air is fresh against me. It makes some of my body evaporate away. And there isn't a path in the air like there wasn't a path in the skin, but the way I'm falling is the way I am. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was great. I really enjoyed hearing you read that, because obviously I've read it in the editing rounds, but it's always different to hear the author actually reading out their work. Thanks. Wow. Okay. One thing I forgot in my intro is, if you have any questions for the authors, please pop them in the chat, and then we'll get round to that after we've done the readings. Right. Next up, we have Katie Hay-Molopo with her story, It Is Well. Katie is an editor and writer whose stories often explore her faith, the hopeful, the imaginative, and the complexities of being human with other humans. Katie, if you're ready, you can go ahead and read.
Yep. Thank you so much, Lena. Thank you, Julia. That was amazing. One of the things I wanted to say about like being part of Hillfire is that I think it was posted on the Instagram or something a little while ago, but it said that Hillfire seeks to share words that set the room aflame, and I have claimed that as my mantra for writing in 2022. So thank you, Lena. Thank you, Hillfire. As Lena said, I'll be reading an excerpt from my story, It Is Well, and I'm just going to start right at the beginning. Close your eyes, relax your lips, let them part, no tension in the jaw. Inhale through your nose, widen the nostrils, breathe from your belly, not your chest. Gently hold the breath there. Let it nourish your body. Feel it sink down your ribs, past your hips, into your toes. Now, release it through your parted lips. Take your time. Do it again. So she did. Like water through a straw, she thought to herself, deep cleansing breath. Michelle envisioned her straw and breathed. Unfortunately, she breathed not like the yogi she aspired to be, but like a 5-year-old schlucking soda through a bendy straw, and she coughed, her eyes popping open. The man queuing in front of her peered over his shoulder and shuffled forward. She squeezed her lips together and tried to hide her cough behind her mask, praying the people around her knew she was just having a little attack of throat tickles. Nothing contagious, nothing to warrant running away from her. Normally, she would never come to the shops at this time of day, the strange mid-morning rush when all the mums were trying to get the shopping finished before their little ones needed lunch and naps. She had nothing against mums and tiny ones, having 3 grown ones herself. But it did make for frazzled clerks and annoyed shoppers and sluggish, crowded queues and, for Michelle, piqued anxiety. Michelle closed her eyes again. Anything to calm her heart, which had been racing since she'd entered the shop 20 long minutes ago. She tried to picture herself from the top of her salt and pepper head to the soles of her mismatched socked feet. She wasn't standing on a linoleum floor slick with rain, squinting under harsh LED lights. She was in the woods, somewhere where the air was cool but not clammy, and the only noise was the rustling of a soft breeze through conifers. Store assistant to till 4, please, the automated voice rang out over the bustle, pulling Michelle back to the shop, back into the clamor of burly men in orange vests tapping their toes as their teller tried to count correct change, and young parents haggling with their toddlers for control over cans of beans and shopping trolleys. Michelle felt her heart rate rise again, her breathing grow shallow. Then, as unexpected as a butter knife slicing through a brick, a sweet sound floated into Michelle's ear. It was smooth, consistent, like a mountain brook babbling over round stones. Michelle didn't recognize the tune, but it was rich, It was repetitive. It was peace. Then it was words. It is well, it is well with my soul. Michelle stole a glance over her shoulder. A mum leaned on a pram with a bright yellow cover. The baby propped up inside was asleep, her head relaxed into an awkward angle and her dummy dangling from her tongue. The mum stared just above everyone's heads as she sang, absent-mindedly rolling her foot back and forth on one of the pram wheels. The line she sang looped, sometimes as melody, sometimes as lyrics. Michelle allowed the song to take her for a wander, back to her forest. The panic in her chest stilled, and she felt her feet root into the linoleum as if it were plush, churned soil. When the clerk finally announced, "Next, please," with more gusto than necessary, she didn't jump or fret. Instead, she turned. "That's so soothing," she managed to say. The mum smiled, and Michelle moved forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Lots of clapping hand emojis. Ah, so nice. Yeah, you have the guts to sing on a live stream. That's fantastic. In a reading. Wow. So impressed. And again, like, you know, I'll probably repeat myself tonight. It's just so nice to hear the work read out. It's so different. I'm so glad we're doing this. Yeah, also good motto, you know, the right words that set the room on fire. That's a pretty tall order, but you know, if you aim for that, your writing's got to be good. And one of the other things that I'm going to give away about Hillfire is that the gauze flowers, they're beautiful, they're fairly small, and they make this spectacular effect together, and that's something I'm aiming for in drawing together the anthology. I think it's working. Cool. Next up, we have Hannah Maria Vesta, and she's going to read her poems Control S and Get Back. Hannah Maria is a poet and editor who lives in Germany, and she's also involved in running a weekly poetry power hour that I love going to on a Sundays, but haven't been to in far too long. And she told me that that's where at least Get Back, the poem, originated. Very much looking forward to your readings, Hannah.
So much. I'm actually just going to read the one poem, if that's okay, which is Get Back. So get ready for a Beatles song stuck in your head, I suppose. I just want to start out by saying I've never been published ever as a poet, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And it's genuinely been so much fun. Like, thank you to Lena and everybody involved in this. I have to say, genuinely, the collaboration and editing behind the scenes made me fall in love with writing all over again. So thank you so much. Quick shout out to specific people who helped me. I want to thank especially Todd and Marsha, because they gave me really valuable insight. So I actually understood what I was writing about, which is always good. I also want to thank Haley, who's seen so many versions of this poem. And I want to thank you for your amazing brain, curiosity, and kindness. And finally, I want to thank Kata, my friend, who inspired me to take my own writing seriously. Thank you for your poetry and your friendship. And now I'm going to get into the poem, which is called Get Back. Crushing is forever unrequited, licking my wounds, mourning your sweet mugs of sage tea, the disappeared espresso cups. You are not my story anymore, but I raven around like the wolf. who, feverish, thirsty, cut between trees, is stuck between pages I tore and burnt up months ago. Opening a new book, giving you a new name, committing to an idea similarly terrific, I slip into the glade and fill this blankness, make him into dreams and sweat him out into mangled hands as if they held his ones, when really they hold so much more. Conspicuous things in the mycorrhizal seas, creased, covered and cased teenage letters, wrapping of delicate matter. We believed in these canopied tales. We never knew better, we just knew more. And most lies, boxed and buried inside, only became untrue with time. Emerging from the forest's heat, adorned in white and angled spine, and full of moon and red with pine. These eyes unearth what lies asleep. These ears drop gasps, faint and unclean, held dearly by these hands unwrung. These words unstrung ring underneath, make beauty out of barren fields, and lie in them, raking a feast for teeth to rediscover. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks. That was a beautiful reading. And it took on, like, this poem, I've read it a couple of times, but you kind of read it differently as an editor trying to order pieces and stuff. So it's been really nice to just sit back and enjoy it. And I actually understood it in a different way now. It was really, really lovely. Thank you so much. And sorry about the mix-up. You told me that you were reading Get Back, of course. And I have had the song stuck in my head since you sent me that email. So there you go. All right. So next, we have Bhavika Govil reading from her short story, A Sea in My Stomach. Bhavika is the winner of the Pontas and JJ Bowler Emerging Writers Prize, and she has also won the 2019 Bound Short Story Prize and performed at the Edinburgh International Book Festival and Paisley Book Festival. Off you go, Bhavika.
Thanks, Lena. I just realized I set myself up for higher standards than I wanted to, but that was a really lovely reading and poem, Hannah, so thank you. I'll get right into my story. A Sea in My Stomach. One day, I woke up and swallowed the sea. It was my first time at the beach after the separation. I was busy looking at the happy people around me when a wave submerged me and spat me out onto the sand a couple of minutes after. A few people came and made a fuss. One man, who claimed he was a doctor, thumbed the center of my head with a cool metal appliance and asked, "Is your balance okay?" Apart from a new ache in my belly, I felt normal. So I walked back to the hotel. At night, when I went to brush my teeth, I noticed something strange. My skin looked moist, fresh, like I'd been crying all day. I peered into the mirror and saw coarse bits of sand in my teeth, tiny fish rolling on my tongue, and a lasting smell of greasy noodles permeating my breath. I stared for a while and went to bed. I had to get up several times that night to pee. Each time I met people after, I began to keep my mouth closed. I pretended to gulp water at work, but would spit it out into a plant immediately afterwards. Even a hint of excess salt in food made me puke. Some days, I felt bloated, heavy. Other times, I was gushing, overjoyed to be alive, a thrilling energy beating inside me. Mostly, I stayed away from social situations. I didn't want anyone to know. People tend to be afraid if they know you carry the sea inside you. It unsettles them. They stare. One time, I couldn't avoid it. In between appetizers at a party, where I hardly knew anyone and detested everyone that I did know, someone nearly caught me. People had been discussing the unusually low tide at sea, the rising prices of oil, the falling standards of men. I was bored. I started drinking. I forgot my inhibitions. I started talking. Fish! A woman grabbed my arm and looked at my mouth curiously. I swallowed my spit, murmured, Fish? I didn't see fish. I adore fish. Where's the fish? I shoved the person towards the catered plate that was floating by and fled. At the divorce proceedings, my husband showed a new side to him. He didn't want the car. He didn't care for the house. He hardly wished to keep the money, but he began to weep when the lawyers brought up the kids. His face crumpled and he slid back into his chair. He begged me, please let me see them. Please don't take them away. I had seen him actively kick a turtle at the zoo when no one was looking. So this amused me. I thought of fighting back, especially after everything he had done to me. But the waves in my stomach tugged at me. I felt the fish nibbling away at my skin, and I felt content. I had a whole life inside me now, the chance for a fresh start after 10 years. I let him continue for a few minutes before I touched my stomach and said, see them. You can keep them. Thank you. You can read the rest of the story in Hillfire Anthology Volume 1. Lena will give you the details.
Thank you so much, Bhavika. That was so, it made me laugh. Fish, where's the fish? That's awesome. I love that. And also the line, people tend to be afraid if they know you carry the sea inside you. Yeah, very philosophical as well. Thank you. That was really nice to listen to. And I'm also very excited about this next reading, This Blooming Blank Poem by Wendelin Law. Wendelin is a poet, writer, and M- lover. Born in Hong Kong's concrete jungle, she dislikes conformity and loves to experiment with forms. She's won in the Hong Kong top story competition. Go for it, Wendy.
Thank you so much, Lena, for this lovely introduction. And also thank you so much, everyone, the Hillfire team and all the writers putting together this beautiful, beautiful anthology. Okay, so the poem's titled This Blooming Blank Poem. And this is it. Basically, it's literally a blank poem on a blank page. And I'd like everyone to imagine that now turning over to the next page, and you'll see asterisks and an obelisk scattered all over the blank poem. And you'll see at the bottom of the page, a series of footnotes. And these footnotes would provide one of the many possible interpretations of the blank poem. And I'm going to read these out. This blooming blank poem, asterisk, consists of blank verses, a branching self, pedestals of tercets after tercets, a bundle of sextets hiding among couplets within quatrains, an inflorescence of octets, blooming, a sea of petals, miming, a waterless flood, Asterisk, where invisible graphemes are budding as morphemes conglomerate, the translucent blossoms on the snow-white page against the shadows around you, the black boughs, spikelets, the overlapping awns, all spindling slowly into this shapeless shape poem. Asterisk, beneath which a generation of seeds awaits germination into full-blown meanings, here, on this ground, lying on your palms, your screen. Obelisk, as you read till this bare line, still searching for symbols, spiders, signs, the suppressed voice in your mind creeps in crescendo, blooming. Asterisk, rhythmically soundless, the iambic pentameter shuddering silently in the wintry breeze, the gentle rustling of several flipped pages, significations, semacia, spring in the void.
Thank you so much, Gwendolyn Law. That was amazing. I kept, like, that was what I was kind of wondering the whole time, how you would read out a blank poem. And I think you've done really, really well. It was surprisingly lovely to listen to these footnotes read out loud. Thanks so much for sharing that. The next reader is Lola Gastañaga-Bachen with her short story, The Truth in Silver. Lola lives, works, and writes in Edinburgh about what is and what isn't, probably. Off you go, Lola.
Thanks, Lena, and thanks, Gwyneth Paltrow. If there's a more pleasurable way to banish psychic vampires, we don't know it. This essential oil blend of lavender, rosemary, and juniper is an energy-refreshing scent that will conjure up positivity and keep you and your energy safe. It's 30 quid, and another 15 for shipping. Me and Rose laughed so hard we almost pissed ourselves, splayed out in our big rat's nest of clothes and throw pillows, wearing nothing but our pants and friendship bracelets. Imagine that, she laughs after finally catching her breath. The corners of her eyes crinkle with joy as she grins up at me, upside down, her cheeks red with effort. She is the kind of beautiful that makes your teeth ache and your eyes water. And I want nothing more than to lean down and kiss her soft, dark brow, to hide away in the crook of her neck, and to hold her without ever hurting her. Gwyneth Paltrow's either insane or an evil genius. Claiming you can just spritz some lavender on and get rid of all the shite people in life? Psychic vampires. Where do they come up with this shit? I shrug and say something unfunny about crystal tampons. It doesn't matter. I'm rewarded with more shrill laughter at the sight of Rose's legs kicking in the air. The bedroom smells like her, thick and heavy on my tongue. It's intoxicating. I can't help myself. Maeve? She asks me one day, her chin propped up on her hand as we delay our return to homes where the other is not. Do you think we'll die here? It's a question that should surprise me, but it doesn't. Still, I put on my best grin and ignore the slight ashiness of her skin, the dull film over her eyes. In class, don't think that's very likely, no. Rose doesn't laugh. She rolls her eyes and cracks her knuckles in what is quickly becoming a nervous habit. She's started distancing herself from other people, fighting with her mum, ignoring her friends from dance class. But we're together, joined at the hip, best friends forever, and more too, but she doesn't know the meaning of eternity yet. No, you dick. You know, in this town, like this. Do you think we'll ever make anything of it? I don't. Her throat catches, but she pushes through. I don't want to just wither away without ever seeing anything. Fuck, Rose! I laugh and make a big show of shaking my head. I'm good at that, making a show. Of course not. You're gonna make it big, remember? Where's all this coming from anyway? Soft autumn light pours in through the window, her dark curls gilded by the setting sun. She isn't sleeping well, probably hungry all the time, too. I slide my eyes down her face, along the exposed curve of her neck. My hand finds hers, offers a reassuring squeeze, and her voice comes out in a tremble. I keep having these dreams, she starts, her eyes fixed on her intertwined fingers. I know her well enough to know she feels self-conscious, like she's making too big a deal. It's stupid, but I feel like I'm buried alive. I can't breathe or move, and there's this thing sitting on my chest, hissing that it'll never leave. Maeve, it's so fucking gross, all skinny and pale, and I can't move. I look down at her hands as well. She's lost weight. The thin red string wrapped around her wrist is looser than it was when I tied it there. Her voice breaks in a sob, but she pushes it down, takes a deep breath, gathers herself. I'm just not getting any sleep. I know I'm just exhausted, but I can't get the fucking thing out of my head. I don't know how to get it to stop. I try to soothe her. When that fails, I try to distract her. I promise to get her a dream catcher, offer to check if Goop has some mystical spray to get rid of tantric nightmare monsters. Ghoul be gone, whatever. Eventually, Rose smiles again, but I know it's all bullshit. I still don't take my hands off of her. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lola. I can see people clapping in the Zoom and on the chat. Fantastic. Yeah, this was really like almost theatrical reading. It's really nice. Really good to hear. And yeah, it's a chilling story. I always found it chilling when I read it. And this is also, I kind of, listening to you, it made me happy because I love how many different things we're getting together in Hillfire and how they work, you know, as one anthology. Because very often when you submit things, then some people want genre, some people don't want genre. And then it's so hard to like, I mean, to even tell what is genre and what isn't. And it can be very, it can be very frustrating, and then you kind of can end up with more monotonous publications and stuff. And so I don't know, I just got really excited that you don't have to fit into one particular slot to be published in Hillfire. Right. Thanks so much for that lovely reading, Lola. And next we have Anthi Himariu with her poems Flat Calling the Elites and You Leeches Go to Living Flesh. Anthi's been longlisted in the National Poetry Competition, and she's been classically trained in piano and cello, and her love for music and by extension of mathematics manifests in her poetry. Over to you, Anthi.
Thank you, Lina. Thank you. The poems that I'm going to read are included in Hillfire. I love them because they remind me how severe a writer's block can be. So they are a reminder of that, taking pieces, bits and pieces, and putting them together. So I will start with Ulysses Go to Living Flesh. Ulysses go to living flesh, a parasite, who have thought it has so much power, lurking, glowering malevolently, fermenting trouble, opening jaws, young men cavorting on a rainy day, searching for the next burdened purple flesh to savor. Shock of fire up the leg, different butchering cats found by cats. Reached out and patted the sore flesh, lying in a heap on the floor, suddenly stopped lasciviously. You relish your precious artifacts, badges of honor, your victims in the golden hour. And the second one, a flag calling the elites. A siren so loud, you hear it in your blood, a throbbing making you aware of your own body. Lungs, stomach, hands, legs, as you were recounted what you have not lost, for an ethnos that demands for you to listen. A Prada hat and a German cigarette that is lounging in your hands. A suit sitting on a dim lighted gentleman's club, facing a window. A silk scarf flutters on a woman's neck like white cotton seeds, drying in the wind, a movement so strong, flag calling the elites. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthi. So great to hear you read your poems. Finally, we've planned so much beforehand, like discussing, who would read what and what order people would read. And then just this morning, I started panicking and asking everybody how to pronounce their names. So, it's been interesting, and it's really, really lovely that it's finally happening. And I hope I'm getting the names right. Yeah, so we'll just carry on with the next reader, Nicole Christine Caradas, with her story Jack and Janita Fall Apart. She's not Janita, Nicole Christine Caradas is a fiction writer from Chicago, working on her first novel while she's doing her PhD in creative writing at the University of Edinburgh. Nicole Christine Caradas.
Thanks, Lena, and thank you to the whole Hillfire team. I'm really excited to be part of this anthology. This is an excerpt from my story, Jack and Janita Fall Apart. Now, this story is told backwards, so when you hear the timestamps going in the wrong direction, that is correct. But yeah, this is my story. December. Janita finds herself back in the same house as last New Year's Eve. She stands on the balcony overlooking the city, a bubbling glass of Prosecco cradled in her hands. Ah, yes, some nice fresh air, a man says as he steps out onto the balcony. Janita tries to place him, but doesn't recognize him. Did you accomplish your resolutions this year? The man asks. I can't remember if I made any. Mine was to lose 2 stone, the man laughs and pats his stomach that strains against the buttons of his green shirt. I think I still have some time left. Janita struggles to remember. Surely she and Jack set resolutions. They always had in previous years. All she remembers from the 1st of January is that silly quiz's prediction, the one that hasn't come true in the last 364 days, 23 hours, and 58 minutes. We should head in, it's almost time, the man shouts before running back into the house. She follows him inside. The living room is full of people, but she cannot see Jack anywhere. Knowing him, she walks down the hall to the kitchen. Jack clutches a bottle of IPA. His legs dangle from the counter where he sits, his head low. It's almost midnight, Janita remarks. Have you been in here all night? Shouts erupt from the living room, counting down the final seconds of the year. Janita hops onto the counter, trying to catch Jack's gaze. 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year, the party cheers. Happy New Year, love, Janita says, angling her upper body to face him. Jack finally looks up. He's been crying, or his eyes are red. Jack? I'm sorry, Janita, his voice is barely a whisper. I don't think I love you anymore. November. There is a heat wave. Janita starts running again. She trains for a 5K she never signs up for. Then she trains for a 10K, then a half marathon. Where have you been all day? Jack asks. Ran 15 miles. Careful or you'll run away from me, he says, wrapping his arms around her sweaty body. The next day, Janita runs 20 miles. October. They post pictures on the internet from an apple orchard. They wrap their arms around each other as if happy. They carve pumpkins without looking at each other, only to laugh when they reveal theirs and find they both carved Tinky Winky. They post pictures posing with their pumpkins, smiling for real. Night falls and Jack brings his pillow to the couch. He claims he needs to elevate his chest. He's having congestion issues, and this is what the nurse recommends. When Janita wakes up in the middle of the night, she's sleeping straight down the middle of the bed. September. Their birthdays fall a week apart. Janita always laments that they don't share a day. We could have one big cake, she says. They laugh together, knowing neither of them would ever share a cake. August. Janita and Jack spend the afternoon smoking out of the bong that Jack found in the attic of his childhood home. I've missed you. I've missed you too. Clothes strewn across the apartment, crisp packets scattered across the kitchen floor. They feel like their old selves again. Janita looks at Jack, and it's like a giant neon heart appears above his head. Janita wipes the tears that have pooled in her eyes. The back of her hand is streaked in black as she realizes her new mascara isn't waterproof after all. July. Jack avoids Janita. June. Jack quits the art gallery. Janita asks what happened, but he just wants to go for a pint with his mates. She hates it when he drinks. Jack used to wake up in people's gardens. She'd receive calls from strange numbers, Jack on the other end, mumbling that he was on the corner of some street and some other street. Jack swore he was done drinking when they moved to their new flat. This is a serious flat for serious people, he preached. We can have cocktail parties, catered, of course. Maybe a glass of red wine with dinner, if it goes with the main course. Jack doesn't come home for 3 days after he quits. He doesn't call or text or answer any of Janita's calls and texts. The check mark never turns blue and the calls go straight to his voicemail box, which isn't set up. When he does reappear, he buzzes the flat. Hey Bean, it's me. I lost my keys. Let me up? Janita considers hanging up the receiver and leaving the button unpressed. A minute later, he's at the door, which Janita left cracked open before locking herself in the bedroom. May. Janita's school friend, Sarah Beth, comes to town for a while. Janita offers her the couch, but Sarah Beth insists she couldn't impose on Jack's space. No ring yet? Sarah Beth asks over a breakfast of parfaits and mimosas. I thought in Sky for sure. I asked him about that, Janita says before gulping the rest of her drink. He said it's lazy to propose on Valentine's Day. Sarah Beth considers this, nodding her head in approval. Well, that's surprisingly good of him. Janita wants to ask her friend's opinion on men making their assistants work late, but doesn't. Jack never liked Sarah Beth. She's no good for you, he'd say whenever Janita asked why he didn't join them out. Funny, she said the same thing about you. My point exactly, he'd say with a kiss on Janita's forehead. Sarah Beth pours more champagne, this time without the fresh orange juice. What about you, Janita asks. Any proposals on your horizons? If Lauren brings that up, I will run away to the Highlands and never be seen again. Janita remembers the first time the topic of marriage with Jack came up. They had been together for 7 months and Janita's cousin had just proposed to his partner. Think that'll be us one day? She asked, her heart pounding as she realized that she may have just ruined 7 months of paradise. No doubt, he replied without hesitation. And then we'll have a kid or two, retire to the countryside, raise some sheep. How's that sound? I like sheep. Thank you. If you want to know more about what happens to them, you'll have to read it in the anthology.
I like sheep too. Oh, thanks, Nicole. That was really nice reading. And yeah, I'm intrigued. I mean, why on earth would you write a story backwards? That's an inside joke because I'm writing a novel backwards. So, right. I wanted to give a brief overview of how we do things at Hillfire again in the middle before the next reading. And just for maybe we have people on the stream who haven't been following our social media for a while, I just wanted to say again that we don't do a traditional submissions process. We are a team of writers and we each publish something in the anthology each year. So there's no sort of submitting something and then it getting accepted or rejected. You set out and you either choose something that you've already written or you write something new and you know that it'll end up being published. And then obviously if we do this, we need to make sure that the finished pieces are really, really good because we want to publish a really, really good anthology. So we have through the year, next year, hopefully a bit more relaxed than this year because everything was very compressed. We have a series of workshops where the writers amongst each other workshop their pieces. So you kind of give your piece to a group of writers, you exchange the pieces, and then everybody gets feedback from the other writers. And then we have 2 rounds of slightly more formal editing where an editor from the Hillfire team will sort of give editorial advice on each piece and then sort of work on it with the author to produce the next improved version. And then that goes to a different Hillfire editor and the process is repeated. So when the story comes out in the end, it's really good, or the poem or the play. Because we also have a play in our anthology, which I'm really excited about. Yeah, so just as a bit of background information, I'm finding it really fun and rewarding to work this way. And I think with, you know, if you're a writer and you want to get your work out there, inevitably you'll get rejected a lot because you just have to submit to a lot of places. And that means you'll get a lot of rejections. And it's just nice to know that you have one guaranteed publication each year that you can celebrate in a proper launch, which is always really nice, do all the readings, and then hold an actual book in your hands. It's good. I'm really glad we're doing this, folks. Thanks so much. And thanks again for your reading, Nicole. Really enjoyed that. Right, the next reading is a poem by Haley Bernier, and it's called The Last Day I Ever Touched Him. Haley is a queer Canadian writer whose work has been shortlisted for the University of Edinburgh's Poetry Prize. She's also involved in running the Poetry Power Hour that I've mentioned before on Sundays. And I'm really looking forward to your reading, Haley.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone watching and to everyone on the team. This is very exciting. I'm just gonna go right to it. So this is the last day I ever touched him. We were an hour from leaving and he wanted a haircut. Anything to cool his brown eggshell scalp, almost bare to begin with. I hesitated because I could see the dandruff, small constellations of skin, the whole night sky crumbling to the floor. He earnestly rushed to the bathroom, bent his hunched shoulders further to extract the electric razor. He didn't bother with a towel. The grit of hair collected sandy on the back of my hand, a trail of the removed. I clenched my mouth as I buzzed, hoping not to catch any scalp in my teeth, revulsion paling my cheek. He made me go over it twice, wanting it clipped shorter, and he was grateful, nodding at his reflection, tiny flecks of hair behind his large ears. He stood, swept his hand over his shirt collar and the cotton peak sleeves. Sand and stars go flying and then bury themselves in the cracks beneath our feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. This poem, when I first read it, made me have a very visceral reaction. And I think it's very, like, that sort of is very cleverly juxtaposed with the headline. I think it really works well, and it works even better now that I've heard you read it. Fantastic. This is lovely. All right. Thanks so much. And the next reading will be Lauren and Thurman with What Miss Addie Remembers. Lauren is a writer and editor from Colorado. She's had her work featured in the Moth Radio Hour and is currently working on her first novel. She is also the copy editor of Hillfire Anthology. The story made me cry when I read it for the first time, so beware. Off you go, Lauren.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you, everyone who's tuning in. So like Lena and like some of the folks who have been editors in the anthology, I have already read all of these pieces a few times since I was the copy editor. So it's really, really exciting to hear them read it in their own voice and hear them a little differently than I was. And it's just making me excited all over again for this anthology. So thank you. This story, What Miss Addie Remembers, is largely the product of moving back to my hometown and being very, very frustrated with how little the city and the state are doing to help our unhoused neighbors and to protect us from climate disasters. So here we go. What Miss Addie Remembers. Oh, I will be reading most, but not all, of this very, very short story. Sorry. What Miss Addie Remembers. If you ask her, Miss Addie will be happy to tell you about the very last time it snowed in Denver. It happened in March, which was common, and the flakes came down fat and heavy, which was not. Miss Addie will close her eyes and turn her freckles sunward and conjure the memory for you. What the air smelled like when the temperature dropped, what time it was when the snow began to fall, how it never seemed to get dark that night because the snow reflected all the lights of the city back up to the low-slung clouds. She will tell you how quiet the world went, how she wriggled out of her sleeping bag, unzipped her tent, and stepped out from beneath the highway overpass to hold her tongue out and let the flakes melt there. That was 26 years ago. Sure, everyone who was here for the last snow can remember it, but only in the barest sense of the word. Just like, sure, you remember your 5th birthday party, but only because you've seen the photos and you've heard your mother talk about it enough times to draw a picture in your mind. But everyone agrees that Miss Addie has the best memory of the day, the definitive memory. She comes on TV every so often, usually around Christmas, and the networks have her tell the story of the last snow. Some reporter will find where she's pitched up and interview her from the side of the road. Wherever she is, however rough she looks, she tells the story with joy, with relish. People make memes of her online, pictures or videos cutting together the phrases and mannerisms that color every one of her retellings. The deep breath with closed eyes, the pa, 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 to imitate the fat flakes hitting a nearby tart. Her little motto that always comes with a sly smile. Everything we do is for the last time, until the next time. As something of a household name, Miss Addie gets special treatment. There is a sense throughout the city that people ought to look out for her. She is the keeper of a precious memory. She is handled gently. People try to take care of her. Nothing unreasonable, $1 here or there. Folks won't call the cops on her if she's camped near their property. Goodwill like that. Some people in community message boards even reported seeing her set up in the middle of Civic Center Park for a couple weeks. And when she was finally escorted out, it was in a wheelchair and not at the end of a nightstick. Her knee is bad these days, apparently. Someone heard it's arthritis, someone else heard she got caught at the wrong end of a sweep truck. But lately, people haven't heard from her at all. Message boards are lit up asking, has anyone seen Miss Addie? Is she okay? How can we help her? It's early fall now, so the cold isn't a concern yet, but the smoke is. The fires usually burn from May through to Halloween. If not uphill in the Rockies, then over on the West Coast, where the smoke still comes over to blanket Denver in a choking haze. For days at a time, it's not safe to be outside. Most folks lock themselves at home with their air purifiers and cooling systems. And when they have to go out to walk their dogs or get groceries, they wear masks to filter out the worst of it. When the air quality reaches a certain level, the shelters will change their rules so that the unhoused can stay inside all day. It could be Miss Addie has just been hunkered down in a shelter and no one has cared to mention that they've seen her. But it could also be worse than that. Try not to think about it. Forecasters are saying that the air quality should clear up soon, hopefully this time for at least a month. When that happens, when the LED lights on the particulate alert board switch back to green, Denver will step cautiously outside again. The people with homes will walk to the park or take bike rides down to the reservoir. The people without will be waved away from the shelters and dispersed to the few corners of the city where they are able to exist unchallenged. And maybe Miss Addie will toddle down the street with that smile on her face and rest on her favorite bench in the park. Passers-by, relieved, will tell her that they've missed her and hand her $1 or a croissant. When she's not busy telling kids what it sounds like to walk on packed snow, then she may be sitting in perfect stillness on the bench with her eyes closed and her face lifted full on to the beating sun. And you may stop to ask her if she's doing it right now, if she's committing another day to memory. Oh yes, she'll say, her eyes still closed. But what is she trying to remember? She'll sigh, her smile slackening. There's no smoke in the sky today, no fires burning. Might be the last time that ever happens. I want to remember it as best I can. And I will stop there. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, Marta is saying it in the chat, story is absolutely heartbreaking. Imagine only knowing snow from someone else's memories. Yeah, let's do something about it. There are things we can do. There's an organization called Stop the Money Pipeline. I haven't planned this, but like divesting from fossil fuels is really important. And it can seem like the individual actions are too small, but just like gorse flowers lighting up a whole hill, together they can actually really achieve something, and it's all better than not doing anything. So let's go. Thanks for that reading, Lauren. Yeah, really good reading. Okay, all right, so on to the next one. This will be Ren Fleming, who writes as Ren True, and she will be reading a short story from Hillfire Volume 1, and she's joining us today while she's on holiday in Edinburgh, so that's really exciting, and I'm very, very glad you're making the time, Ren. She says she favors endearing characters and unexpected, often fantastical elements in her stories. So I can't wait to hear it, Ren. There you go.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, sounds good. I apologize in advance because I'm doing this from a hostel, so there might be mysterious noises or like voices in the hallway. So just beware. But this is just the beginning of my short story called Ode. And Ode refers to the name of one of the characters. His name is Taggart Ode. Okay. This is it, said a man named Taggart Ode, on the back steps of a beach house he couldn't recognize. His companion, a petite woman with frizzy hair and pointed teeth, scurried inside ahead of him. Taggart followed and put the cooler in the kitchen. He prepared 2 glasses of iced tea, listening to the screen door screech open and a rush of wind fill the house. Theo, pointed teeth, appeared in the kitchen with a cockroach in her hand. I found this. You're afraid of dogs, but you'll pick up bugs, said Taggart with a wince. Throw it out the back, the seagulls will get it. They sat on the porch for a while, even after they had finished the tea. When the sun was just setting, Sending pink blankets over the water, they moved inside and set the radio on low. Theo sat close to the window, curled up on the couch with her chin on her palm. Taggart reclined in an armchair with his legs crossed, holding a newspaper he wasn't reading. He eyed Theo, who said blissfully, "I love the ocean." Taggart didn't want to start. He pressed his lips together because he knew this created a dimple in each cheek, making an effect like but without the effort. Paragraph he'd already skimmed twice. The radio blared static, but it was quiet static. It's at times like this when you try to remember. Their eyes met. Why do you say that? This place, it must be nostalgic for you, said Theo. I don't know how that feels anymore, said Taggart, squeezing the paper between his fingers. That can't be true. Nostalgia is what you feel when you think about the past. This place must make you want to think of the past. Must be nice, he muttered without looking at her. There was a pause in which he wanted to crush the paper in his hands, carry the cooler back to the car, and drive home. When he peeked at her, she was still staring at him as though he had never allowed cruel stubbornness to control his voice. Pointed teeth glimmered beneath her lips as she asked, "Want to try right now?" He never liked asking first. I don't know, said Taggart. Tired. She frowned. I'm sorry. She stood and approached him. She removed the paper from his lap, leaving it on the floor. Taggart began to protest as she straddled him on the armchair. It's easier for me this way, she said. Glasses on or off? He didn't know what to say. She took his glass. What's wrong? He pressed his lip. I'm fine. Oh, Taggart, she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. Remember what we said, what we agreed. She drew back her hands and flexed her fingers with the pointed nails. We'll help each other. She cradled his head in her hands and raked those pointed nails lightly over his scalp, the rim of his ears, and his temples. He shut his eyes, preparing for the nails to puncture his skin in deep, deeper and expected, like worms muscling through mud. His flesh swallowed Theo's fingers, and his skull broke away to allow her entrance to his brain. The two things he remembered were the two times he was injured bad. The first time was in northeastern Italy, in the form of a piece of shrapnel that carved through his helmet, the very one that was promised to protect his skull and everything inside. It stuck to his scalp like a nail holding a tool in place. The second time was a blunder some years later, back home, on the back of a truck, when like a youngling animal, he stuck his head out into the world at exactly the wrong moment. And those two things silenced his past forever, as though Taggart Ode had never had a beginning. He wasn't born or produced, just revealed suddenly on a green Italian slope, with an old beach house in his name and people who would contact him asking him for money for the years to come. If not for the second injury, he might have gone on all right. He might know why the sound of screaming babies made him taste phantom blood in his mouth, or why the smell of apples cooking in cinnamon made him weepy. Why did the sound of a woman's voice, croaked from decades of smoking, remind him of a small bedroom with violet walls? How come a rusted door handle was an object of terror? How come the rough exterior of potatoes pulled from soil brought him to an unknown place, a land unconquered, a sun like a cannon in the sky, which broke through and collided with him, but not in real life, just in his mind, over and over, pummeling him, knocking him over, pushing him down, tipping a plate and letting him fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Ren. Thanks. That was amazing. Your stories, there's something about your stories. I was in a workshop with Ren during our master's in creative writing, and I still remember, like, I don't even remember what any of the characters are called, but I remember the feeling of the story and the atmosphere. It was about a father and a son going to this old house, and and I get the same sense in this story. I mean, come on, potatoes, rough potatoes pulled fresh from the soil, and like your imagery is just fantastic. Anyway, Ren is saying thank you. So I will. This is it. Unfortunately, I mean, not the event. We still have the discussion to come, but these were all the readings, which is kind of sad. I could listen to you all read for hours. So I will just switch to gallery view now and hope that that translates to the stream. There we go. We're in gallery mode now. Well done, team. This was amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. And if anybody wants to say anything, you can do that now. And otherwise, I'm just gonna go ahead and pick some of the questions that we've had in the chat. There were some fantastic questions in the chat that we can, have discuss with the writers. And now is also the time for everybody who's watching the stream, if there's anything else that you would really want to know, that you want to ask any of the authors, or that you want to know about Hillfire, pop it in the chat and we'll hopefully get to it in the discussion. Right, so there's no immediate response. So I'm just going to go ahead and find the first question. And it's for Julia. Julia's story, Veil of Tears, about the crying and the tears. And Marta says, Julia, how the heck did you come up with this concept? How did you settle on this? Why? I loved it. Just curious about the thought process.
Okay, good question. It was like a long process. I tend to cry a lot, and when I cry, I'm sometimes sitting, but sometimes I'm lying down. And when you lie down, you have the tears that go to the ears, and it's so like I'm crying, but I have to dry my ear because, and these sensations were like important to me. And one day I was crying, and I was just saying, oh, I should write a story about the sensations because I'm always like, sorry about that. I was always distracted by the sensations of the tears and not crying to the end of it. So and when I started writing this story, I was like, but that's not a story, it's just a sensation. So how do I do this? And so then I had to find a story, and I had to ask myself how I wanted to tell this story. And in the end, I just went for the structure of the coming of age novel or something like that. And it was great. And I had a lot of questions about how to name the tears and things like that. And thank you, the editors, for that. Because it was great in the end. So that's the story of it, I guess.
Right. Thanks, Julia. That was good to hear. Very insightful. And I see a lot of the writers nodding, like when you said, this is not a story, this is just a sensation. Getting from the sensation to the story or the poem or the play is at least, I'd say, 50% of making something work, if not more. And Marta says, I love it. That's fantastic. It's very real to the thought process of thinking when crying. Right. Thanks so much. The next question is for Hannah, Hannah Maria Vesta. And Marta would like to know, she says, hello, Hannah. Poetry is usually considered extra personal towards the author. Do you find that very challenging to know your work will be looked at for hidden meanings? So make of that what you will, and remember, you only have to reveal whatever you want to reveal.
Welcome that. I don't know. I'm not really scared of that at all. I love that. I think there was a time when I was nervous about being misinterpreted a lot, but I think especially due to Hillfire, but also before that, like knowing so many people from this program who finished together and then went into the world together, I've just become more comfortable with sharing my work, and with that comes more comfort with, like, I can allow other people's brains into whatever I'm doing. So I feel like I've grown a lot through this. I feel like 2 years ago my answer would have been different, but that's my answer now. I welcome that. Do with it what you will. That's awesome. Very honored if you do that. I think that's what writers want. I think they want you to find yourself in stories or find things maybe you haven't thought of yourself. That's a great question. Thank you so much.
And that's a great answer too. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's exhilarating, kind of letting a piece of writing go out into the world, and then, you know, you just don't have control over it anymore, and people will do things with it in their minds, and that's the whole point of it. And it can be all sorts of things. The next question that I have in here, where I might be missing out on some questions in the middle, so I will go back and look for the ones that I've missed in the meantime, but this one is for Anthi. And the person asking says, that was lovely. How do you handle creating and writing in what isn't your first language? Does it affect your process in any way?
Yes, that's a lovely question. Thank you. I believe that this is a very personal experience, because for each one of us it's different. My background is that I was taught in English and I learned the two languages simultaneously. So the process is kind of exhilarating and weird in kind of way for me, because I can create words that are not there, the combination of the two languages, and then go back and think only in English or think only in Greek, and create new memories and create new phrases that go with one language and then with another. So it's a long process that you have to address it, and the answer, you have to address it to the specific person asking, I believe. And you will have to tailor it, and then there is the universal kind of, yes, I'm a bilingual. I will have my prepositions wrong. It's that kind of thing. But then there is the individual that has to communicate how their brain works, how they see the world. So yes, I believe that it's a long process, and it's a choice at the end of the day to create something in your second language and not in your mother language, the native one. So yeah, I hope we can create, I think I mentioned it in the comments, I think we can create a kind of workshop that we can discuss bilingual people and how they create and how they think, and how they communicate creatively. So yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Anthi. Yeah, it's strange. The language thing is strange. I translate into German, but I find it very difficult to write in German. I only ever write in English. So when I'm writing, English feels like my first language. So yeah, let's do that bilingual writers discussion. That's a great idea. Just looking at the document with the questions again. Oh, this one wasn't, but I just said to Marta, because Marta has so many great questions, I said, can we officially employ you for our next event? Your questions are fantastic. Thank you so much. And then Marta says she'll keep doing it for free, which is very good because we're not earning a lot of money, but generally that's not the best negotiation tactic if someone offers you money. Just joking. Right. So Marta's next amazing question is for Nicole. And Marta writes, hello, Nicole. How did you settle on this format of storytelling between the epistolary and third person omniscient? It's terribly interesting. There you go, Nicole.
I don't think I've actually thought of my story in terms of that. Yeah, basically I write about relationships a lot, and I write about all kinds of relationships, but specifically romantic ones are where I tend to focus. And I like to explore kind of the gray area. So not these sweeping romantic love stories where everything's perfect, and not the super tragic ones either, kind of the more intricate middle area. And so that sounds a lot fancier than what I'm about to say. I got this idea from a BuzzFeed quiz. I was taking BuzzFeed quizzes one day, and it was one about like predicting how your year will turn out or something. And I was like, what if one of these comes true? That would be so funny. So I started writing this story. And at first it went not backwards, it went in normal time. And it just kind of felt like any other story of a relationship breaking down. I felt like that didn't really give me the opportunity to explore things. So then I turned it backwards and thought about looking at relationships with a little bit of hindsight, but then putting it in first person and in this from this perspective where the characters might not have it, but from the outside you have it. And it just seemed to bring out more of these nuances. And I liked it a lot better, and I felt like it was more interesting this way. So I just went with that. Does that answer the question? That's a great question. I just don't know if I answered it.
Thank you. That was really interesting to hear. I don't have an answer to whether you answered it yet in the chat. So if I get an answer to whether your answer answered the question, then I will relay it. But in the meantime, I'll go on to the next question. And this is for Haley. It says, hello, Haley. I agree with Lena. It's very visceral and lived in. Is it, to echo an earlier question, based on any personal experience you'd be willing to share? No worries if that's not the case at all.
Yeah, it is. It's based on a completely real scenario. I mean, there was no real sand or stars, but the haircut scenario happened. Actually, yeah, so I can give you more background. I have 3 poems in the anthology, which I'm very proud of. They're like some of my favorite pieces for my dissertation, and my dissertation is entirely written about my uncle who passed away during the first 2 months of the dissertation of the degree, like in October of the master's, which was like very surprising turn of events. We weren't surprised because he had been sick, but we were surprised because it was very fast. Anyway, so I wrote all these pieces about him, and then spent a lot of time not looking at my dissertation, and then pulled some back up to be put into this anthology. And this one is just, I realized that the last day that I actually hugged him was that day, because anyway, there's another piece in the dissertation where that makes sense, but I don't think it's necessary. Yeah, and on the last day that I ever hugged him, I also gave him a haircut. So I thought that that was interesting because I remember being really uncomfortable because all the stuff that I describe actually happened. So I was like, I don't really want to cut your hair more. Anyway. Yeah, so something to know about me as a writer is that I rarely make things up. I usually am just telling from experience. So I'm a kind of an open book in that way. But thank you for asking.
Thanks so much, Haley. I remember that time. That was a tough time, and thanks for sharing that with us again. And I'm very honored to publish these poems now, and I'm glad they're getting out into the world. There was another question for you, Haley, from Sky, and I'm trying to get it from the chat, which is, bear with me. Oh yeah, so yeah, it was, what's your thoughts on how hair can speak to identity and relationships? That was the related question in the chat.
That's from Sky? That's so cool. Hi, Sky. That's a really good question. And unfortunately, I did not think about that before today. So I don't have a coherent answer. When I was writing this, though, when I was trying to decide on how to get these metaphors to like function together, mostly what I was thinking about was like leaving like physical evidence behind, which is why I have that line, "a trail of the removed," because I mean, when I was writing this poem, Patrick, my advisor, referenced another poem to me where in that poem someone dies, and then months later the husband of this person finds a hair in the plant or something. Like they find evidence of this person like just in their apartment. And I thought that was a really interesting idea, so I tried to like make sure that that was sort of included, that there's like sort of a sense of like physical evidence, meaning that the person is kind of still around even though they aren't still around, which like maybe like a self-feeding cycle of whatever you want to make of it. But yeah, so I think that's what I was getting at. I like, obviously hair is not the only thing. That's not even the only thing I talk about in the poem, but I think that's a good example of like how to attach to people. I don't know. And now I'm losing my train of thought, so I'll stop talking.
Thanks, Haley. Patrick is actually watching the stream, so there you go. Your advice made its way into this, Patrick. Thanks
Thanks
so
Patrick,
much for joining us. Yeah. All right. Sorry, it'll take me a tiny little bit to find the next question. This is where it gets a little bit awkward. Yeah, lots of praise, lots of people saying to Hannah that they're very glad that she has this confidence now, so she's sharing stuff, which I totally agree with. That's really, really lovely. Thanks for all these comments and questions. Nothing quite like a reader beware, you're in for trauma warning. Yeah, well, we do have content warnings in the actual anthology, which I think are created in quite a clever way, because you just have little symbols that are at the bottom of the table of contents, and you can look at the table of contents entirely without looking at the content warnings. So your readings don't get influenced by the content warnings, but you have a way, if there's a particular topic that you'd like to avoid, then you can look for it in the content warnings and find the symbol, and then not actually read about that topic. And I'm quite proud of that. I think it's cool. And it's we did it from Arthur Seed Volume 5, and I can't quite remember. I think we collaboratively came up with it. So I can't really attribute it anymore now. or else I totally would. Right, let me scroll all the way up and see if I can find another question. This one we've already done. Someone's saying to Katie that they were actually doing the breathing along with Katie until the splutter. So this is Ruth Ann, who was doing the breathing but not the spluttering. And then also for the singing, that was beautiful. 10 out of 10 for guts and bravery. Lots of hearts, lots of clapping. Thanks so much. You're such a fantastic audience. This is so nice. Oh yeah, here's a question for Katie. Katie, are you there? I think Katie, yes, there she is. It's from Marta, and it says, Katie, when you write, what is the biggest challenge you face when you sit down and write? Is it the initial start or adapting and editing after?
Okay. Yeah, first of all, thanks everyone for your interactions. That Ruth Ann, that's my aunt, so Aunt Fan, thank you. And the singing, just a tiny note about that. I read the piece so many times, and when you read lyrics without singing them, sometimes they sound really dull. I'm like, it is well with my soul. It just didn't work. So thank you for coming along with me on that. But okay, the question. The hardest thing for me usually when I'm writing is starting. I have a lot of ideas. Anyone who was in my workshop for the creative writing MSc, I can come up with a million ideas at the drop of a hat. If you give me a starting point, I can end up on the other side of the room without much problem, unless I'm trying to write something that needs to be good in my mind. And the self-editor, a lot of writers will sometimes talk about this self-critic or this self-editor who sits in the back of their mind and says, not that word, you're gonna make the character do that. Oh, that dialogue is not good. And you end up staring at a blank page and having the hardest time putting a word on it. I think for me, I love to share stories from my personal experience, kind of like what Haley was talking about. I love to create random things that come from my imagination, kind of like how Ren was talking about. So the hardest thing for me is really picking one and then having the courage to take that sensation and turn it into a story like Julio was talking about. So it's a lot of things, but I think for me, I have to usually get away from my computer, and I have a notebook. I have a Muji pen, which is like the best pen ever. If you've never written with a Muji, you should. And I just sit down and I kind of start journaling, and I usually write the dialogue first. Dialogue comes the easiest for me, so I'll write the dialogue and build the story around it usually, which is ironic because my story I read tonight had like 2 lines of dialogue. So there you go. Thank you so much for your question, Marta.
Oh, thanks, Katie. That's so interesting to hear. Always interesting. And I have never written with a Moji pen, so I guess I'm in for a treat. Yeah. So then we have more enthusiastic responses, and then Patrick asking me, saying gorse flowers also smell like coconut, and asking if I can work that in somehow. And I was like, of course, I'm sure we have some stories in the anthology that are as refreshing as coconut water and or make you feel like you're on vacation on a tropical island or on Arthur's Seat or in Cornwall. But, you know, I didn't actually think of that when I created the name. Yeah, I really like the purpose too, especially now that it's coming together. I love it. This one we've covered. I'm just scrolling, yeah, through all these lovely comments and applause. And someone says amazing bravery. Oh yeah, so here's one for Bhavika. And Mata asks, Bhavika, was this story inspired by any physical place you know? As someone who grew up near the Mediterranean, I struggle imagining the sea as anything other than the Mediterranean. Does the same happen to you?
Thanks for the question. And so I've grown up in a landlocked city. So I think I have a really I have a craving for the sea. And it could be the Mediterranean. It could be, I went to this city near my place, which is a pilgrimage town. And I came across this water body that people usually find quite dirty and disgusting. Sorry, but I found this part of it that was beautiful and I could see my feet through it. And I think maybe I carried some of that into the story. But in reality, I tend to sort of borrow places that I've read in fiction as well. I don't know if other writers do that. And I do think that this could be the same beach or place where, say, Elena Ferrante's The Lost Daughter is set in. Like, I wouldn't mind anyone assuming it's the same beach. Or if anyone's read Homegoing, then there's this water body that they go to at the end of the novel. And it could be that place. And I think it's more the fictional places that I've read than anything real. Thanks for the question, though.
That is so interesting. I totally do this too, and I hadn't realized it, not fully. Yeah, definitely also inspired by fictional places. Thanks so much, Marta, for the question, and Bhavika for the answer. Always nice when you get some takeaways for your own writing process as well. And here's one for Wendy about how do you generally like playing with form, which you basically answered in your bio and say that you love playing with form, but maybe you can expand on it a little bit, in what ways and what it does to your poetry or how it impacts your process.
Okay. The question is on how do I play with form? Is that basically it's just me wanting to be unconventional, I guess. It's it's more like, I'm not sure how to explain this, but it's more of the more you write, the more you feel like you're being sort of enclosed or imprisoned sometimes by the form. And I always sort of imagine these lines of words in a poem are like the bars of a prison. And by thinking outside of the conventional form, maybe I could get out of the bars, something like that. And basically it's just not following the conventional forms. It's writing however you want, I guess, and not really thinking of words or lines in a horizontal or way, something like that. If that answers the question.
Thanks, Wendy. I think it does. I see lots of nodding and agreement in the chat. That was so interesting. I love sort of getting an insight into someone's writing mind. Thanks so much. The question for Lola from Mata, that was lovely, Lola. What was the inspiration behind this story other than Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop? And one from Sky that ties in with that I'm not going to scroll to now, but I think I can remember it, which said that you often write fantastic stories that deal with themes of childhood or youth or growing up, and sort of if you know why, basically.
Yeah, thanks. I think there's sort of two parts to that for me. The real quick, simple answer is that I think I need a little bit of time and space to digest lived experiences before I can have enough distance to look at them and describe them and transform them into stories. And being in my mid-20s, adolescence is about as far or as close as I can get while feeling that I've had the actual time to have a proper think about it. Surely 10 years from now, I'll write about now, but I'm always very impressed by people who can write about life as it happens. I can't do that. And then I think, in what ties in a little bit with Marta's question, adolescence to me is a time where the boundaries between yourself and everyone else are very, very blurred, because you don't have very strong boundaries of the self. And part of the inspiration behind this story was that sort of really intense, sort of codependent, over the top, really passionate, but also often incredibly, tremendously unhealthy and unbalanced kind of friendship / not friendship that defines a lot of, I think, a lot of female adolescent experiences. And I wanted to write about that. And I wanted to write about the influence, feeling like you're not really a person. And like there's this gap in you that you need to fill, has on your relationships with others and the ways in which you can harm others, even if you don't mean to and you don't want to, because you feel empty inside. And then you eat them, or don't, but hypothetically, one could eat them. But yeah, I think that's roughly it.
Thank you, Lola. Yeah. The distance that's an interesting one. Do you write about immediate things or things in the past? I think we have about 5 questions left. And so I do think we have time to go through all of them before we wrap up. This one is for Lauren. And it says, hello, Lauren, the story is absolutely heartbreaking. How do you think stories of folk heroes in the US have influenced your story? And then in brackets, it put me in mind of the Tom Joad song from Bruce Springsteen.
Thank you. That was such a great question. And I remember it popping up in the chat and realizing that I don't really think American folk heroes played into this at all, but there is sort of a similarity. I think for me, I was a little more preoccupied with the tradition of oral storytelling. I have always found it fascinating that people can sort of pass on stories without writing them down. I love that idea. And being a drama queen who reads a lot of sci-fi, I often wonder, will there ever be a time when we have, our society break down such that oral storytelling is the only version left? And so I often imagine people telling stories about what snow was and what birds were and things like that. And so I was sort of like a decaf version of this that I was trying to tell about Miss Addie.
Thanks, Lauren. But you know that birds aren't real, right? Sorry, that is a joke. I feel I have to say this because it'll be on the video. Birds are real. Thank you. Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, sorry maybe that was my need for comic relief because it's such a heavy topic. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that is really interesting how we pass stories on as we're all sort of writing, that you're writing about an oral tradition is actually interesting. I'm really glad that question got asked. Thanks, Marta. And thanks for your answer, Lauren. So then we have one for Ren, and it says, hello, Ren, the story is spectacular. What was the inspiration behind it? Sorry for the generality. I need to know.
Well, I had these two characters, Taggart and Ode, just kind of floating around in my head for a while, and I just didn't know what to do with them. But I really liked their companionship, question mark, and also I'm a visual person, so sometimes I am just inspired by like just images. I'm sure everyone can relate. But there's this series called Demon Slayer, if anyone has heard of it. But there's a part in it where a demon who is several hundred years old is trying to remember something, and he puts his finger inside of his brain to like rummage around to look for the memory. And I just really liked that image, and I was like, I want to put that in a story somehow. So yeah, that's how I put it. That's what gave me the idea. But I also wanted to make it not as sinister as it literally is. Like I still wanted to make it like somewhat endearing at the end, which I guess you'll have to read the end of it when you get Hillfire Anthology. So
Thank you. Thanks, Ren, and thanks for that question. Okay, so then here is a question from Sky to Lauren. Do you find it easier or more difficult to write stories when it's addressing real life, broad issues that you're so passionate about?
Thank you, Sky. I feel like that's the only kind of story that I write these days. I think perhaps I write stories instead of going to therapy, which may not be the best system, but it's what we're working with. Usually if there's any story I've written, there's something that I'm very angry about inside of it somewhere.
Thanks. Thank you. Sorry, that's just me sort of trying to go through the chat at the same time and finding all these amazing questions. And we've almost got them all now. So I think it would be unfair to leave some over. So we'll just crack on with it. So this next one is, sorry, bear with me 1 second. Oh yeah, just a comment pertaining to Nicole Christine Karatas' story. Nicole, it says, hey, you get pearls out of everything if you're clever and skilled enough, even BuzzFeed. So obviously you are. And then also really appreciative of Haley's openness. And Sky loves that concept of physically leaving something behind in such a small but significant way. Yeah, I second that. How do you navigate content warning? Oh, wow, I've answered that unknowingly with the little symbols in our table of contents. And then this one is, hey, Katie, we shared a radio workshop. Oh, wow. And I remembered you referencing a very specific radio show. How does your cultural and religious background influence your writing?
Cool. Wow. Yeah. That was that workshop. That was so long ago. It feels like it anyway. Yeah. So how does my cultural, religious, blah, blah, blah inform? Okay. I can't write without it informing what I produce. So I'm a Christian, and I am constantly thinking about my faith and God and who he is and how I relate to him and how that influences how I relate to other people, especially in light of a lot of the ways that American Christianity has been abused and politicized and radicalized and has done some really heinous things. Me and my husband talk about Christianity and what it actually means to be even generally religious in today's society. I've thought a lot about how, as a writer, religion, in my experience of reading and writing, is not very represented actually in the things that are being produced, and especially in young adult fiction. This is something I think about a lot. Young adult fiction, you don't have a lot of seriously religious characters that are grappling with their faith in a realistic way and are asking difficult questions and are earnestly seeking. I believe that we are all earnestly seeking something, and we are all looking for something to ground us. And as a Christian, I think I've found it. That sounds really arrogant, but I love receiving hard questions and I love grappling with them, and I like it when my characters do that. So it's kind of like how we were talking about earlier. When you put stuff out there, people can take it any way they want. And I mentioned this in our Passages into the Night discussion that we did however long ago it was. Just how literature, that's the power of literature. It's when you give it to someone, they can do with it what they please, and they can engage with it how they want. So I think that writing and written word is a really powerful way to say, here's what I believe, do with it what you will. And that is also to say that it's not like every character I write is a Bible bashing believer. But it does mean that the messages that I wish to convey and the general love, hope, especially hope has been a big one, I think, with COVID recently, and feelings of connection. They have very much colored my work lately. So thank you so much for your question.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks for the question. Yeah, it's funny. I don't really want to comment too much because these things are very personal. But the one thing that I want to say is, like, not being religious at all, I can often relate to what Katie writes, to the sort of spirituality of it, and I think that's interesting too, and nice that we don't have to all believe in the same things or live in the same way to be able to get something from it and or understand it. Yeah, and yeah, all the horrible stuff that is happening in the name of religion, obviously, does not necessarily have to be connected to what you personally live in your personal life, which must be a really hard balance to strike, and also kind of risking being seen through that lens and all that sort of stuff. Right, okay, so on with the questions. This is the second last one, I think, although oh no, we have two more. So one is from Hauke for Hannah. You said that you regained confidence in your poetry, and the re is in brackets. So you gained or regained confidence in your poetry. How did that influence your writing? What did change? And how does one gain or regain that confidence? It's a great question.
That's my brother. So I wanted to laugh and to cry because it's lovely and sweet. I mean, how does one do it? You have to try over and over and meet the right people. I think I was very lucky, and I think we all feel quite lucky being here. And I suppose sharing work with people you trust is probably the first thing I did. There's this impulse to hide, I think, behind what you do and not share. But then, like, what I really learned, or what the moment was probably for me, was that I did get to know so many writers, and community really helps with confidence, I suppose, because you read something somebody's written and you're just like, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to just like create something, and there's beauty in that. And I think also during the passages into the night reading, Julia said something similar. It's play. You get to play and you get to enjoy yourself, and denying yourself that is sadder and it's more scary ultimately than putting yourself out there. And yeah, I was just very lucky to meet the right people at the right time. And this is the perfect moment. Thank you, Hauke, because I forgot. Lina, thank you for taking a chance on me. I'm very grateful. And I'm going to stop talking now, or I'm going to cry.
Oh, I'm so grateful you're sharing your work, Hannah. Thanks so much for being part of Hillfire. This ties in really nicely with, thanks for that insightful question and answer. And it ties in very nicely with Patrick's question. Hi all, so great to see you all doing so well and still staying in touch. A question to you former MSCs. Do you have any tips for current MSCs for how to keep a community of writers going after the degree? And I'm just going to take that one. And first of all, thanks, Patrick, for joining. This means a lot that someone who was, to me at least, I'm sure I can see some hearts popping up in the Zoom chat. It means a lot that you're here and taking an interest in what we're doing, even though you're not formally responsible anymore for what we're doing. Thanks so much for joining us. And in terms of tips for current MSCs, it's like you have to want it and you have to work on it. And I think it starts while you're still studying. And also we were incredibly lucky with our cohort. And I think I'm gonna say this because you teach at university. What I find really important is that the people who are actually teaching are making it very clear that it's not a competition, which it often, really, really often feels like it is. And we're so ingrained in that meritocratic thinking of like, only a certain amount of people gets to the top and there isn't room for everybody at the top. And so I have to be better than everybody to even make it. And it's just not true. We're more like a mesh and we're creating something together, like we're creating a tapestry together or something. And there's room for everybody. And so there is also room to share with everybody. And I think if the people who teach creative writing also make that clear, and obviously you're trying to get accepted and you're trying to win competitions, of course, like who doesn't want to win? And by the way, congratulations on your latest achievements too. But I just think, and this is one of my main reasons for founding Hillfire, it's ultimately it's about the writing. You want to write, and so you write, and you're creating something, and you're playing, and you're wanting other people to interact with it. That's the whole point. But it's not against each other, it's with each other. That's the most important point. So I love sharing the other's successes. And yeah, it's nice. So then if you manage to generate that sort of feeling where you really want the people around you to be successful in what they do as well, then you don't have to be scared of other people being successful anymore, and you can kind of help each other be successful together. That was quite a long answer to that question, but it's just something I'm really passionate about because I think it just makes life so much nicer, and it isn't just true for writing. And it's just it just makes everything more fun. So I really recommend that. And if you have a way of maybe reminding students that that's a possibility, then that would certainly help them to keep a community going after the degree. Yeah, and that was it. Those were all the questions.
Really, here's this. Lauren had to leave, but she did say in the chat, if I had time, I would add that Lena is a big part of keeping this community connected because she's intentional and proactive about maintaining connections with folks. Thank you, Lena.
Oh, thanks. I can't actually see the chat, so thanks for reading that out. And also thanks, Lauren, because even though you're gone, you can watch this later, because this will be available on YouTube. And this is, thank you so much. This is such a good way to end. And if people want to unmute themselves and wave and say goodbye, then I think that would be a really nice way to conclude this. And I will then end the stream and the meeting. Bye, everybody. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.